This poor high schooler just got wrecked by truck going. And when he opens his eyes, he's in an ice sky world where magic is real and water obeys his every thought. But what he doesn't know is that he has a hidden trait, one that makes him ageless. Rio Mahara died. The realization didn't come with pain or fear. It simply was. He opened his eyes to find himself drifting in a pure white void, empty, silent, and endless. Confused, he tried to speak, but his voice barely echoed before a warm, calm presence approached. The figure that emerged wasn't God, at least not exactly. Not by his own claim. A being with an otherworldly calmness introduced himself as Michael, an angel, if that made more sense to Rio. With no mission to fulfill, no burdens to carry, Michael's only instruction for the reborn soul was simple: live however you like. For the first time in his life, or afterlife, Rio could choose peace. No school, no obligations, no society bearing down on him. He wanted a slow life. Michael granted it. A peaceful cottage in a forest called London, in a new world named FAI, surrounded by nature, protected by a barrier, and blessed with 2 months' worth of food. Rio had an affinity for water magic, which suited him perfectly. Magic existed here, after all. The moment Rio blinked and arrived in the new world, he realized this wasn't a dream. No furniture, no sound, just a house, 2 books, and a knife on the table. He stepped outside. Towering mountains framed the horizon. The wind was cool, and the magic was tangible. When he whispered, "Come forth, water," a tiny splash appeared in his hand. It was real. The books explained the rest: basic monster lore, plant properties, and an introduction to elemental manipulation. He discovered he didn't even need to chant incantations aloud, thinking the spell worked just as well. That was slightly disappointing. No cool shouting of spell names. Still, the practical applications were endless. He filled the tub with water and realized how cold it was. Without any firewood or matches, he considered alternatives. Visualizing the water molecules, he forced hydrogen bonds to form. Ice. That ice, he discovered, could function as a crude magnifier to focus sunlight. Fire. Hot water. A bath. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. In that steaming tub, surrounded by nothing but wilderness, Rio felt the reality of his new beginning. But the slow life wasn't free. His food stock would run out in 2 months. The forest beyond the barrier was teeming with monsters. A knife wouldn't cut it, literally. He needed offensive magic. Waterball was his first attempt. It worked, but barely. A small blob of water popped weakly against a tree. Harmless. So he refined the spell. Narrower, faster, sharper. Water jet. The idea of slicing water, pressurized like a blade. Eventually, after hours of effort, a thin stream cut into bark. Progress, but still wasn't enough. Next came ice. He visualized ice forming midair, pulling water molecules from the atmosphere and freezing them in place. It was slower, harder, but possible. He learned to shape spears of ice, icicle lance. Yet they didn't fly like water spells did. Too heavy, too unstable. Still, he trained, hour after hour. Even as his mana drained and exhaustion hit him like a hammer, he pushed forward. If Water Ball wouldn't save him, and Water Jet wasn't strong enough, then Icicle Lance would be his last resort. He had no time to waste. Rio stepped beyond the barrier for the first time. At the riverbank, he found a rock he'd hoped for: quartz. A perfect backup for starting fires if mana ran dry. He scouted for medicinal herbs, hopeful for a simple, peaceful errand. But peace was not what FAI offered. From the bushes, a lesser boar emerged, snarling, tusked, and fast. Rio's body froze. His mind screamed to run, but his feet disobeyed. Until they didn't. A second before impact, he rolled to the side. Ice. Instinctively, he froze the ground beneath the boar. It slipped. While the beast struggled to stand, Rio conjured spears of ice and launched them. The monster was pierced, silenced, and stilled. Rio collapsed, panting. His first kill, his first survival. His slow life was already demanding his best. Back home, he studied the monster encyclopedia. Lesser boars were the weakest. That terrifying foe, a bottom-tier creature. And the stronger ones? Dragons, capable of razing cities. Demons, creatures with no defined origin, capable of warping the world. He shuddered and read on. Every page offered more nightmares. Still, he returned to the forest. The next day brought sweet fruit and more bitter truths. Just as he bit into a juicy, tangy delight, the skies parted with terror. A black-feathered shadow dove, assassin hawk, invisible wind magic, sharp-beaked charges. He was knocked flat before he even saw it coming. He couldn't outrun it. Cornered, Rio used what little magic he had. Ice crystals surrounded the bird, trapping it temporarily. One of its eyes was pierced. The creature screamed and fled. Rio lay on the ground, aching, breathless. That slow life was starting to sound like a lie. Worse, in running from the assassin hawk, he lost track of his home. Still, somehow, he made it back. Night fell, and something called to him. Curiosity, perhaps fate. A headless knight, tending its horse by moonlight. A Dullahan, not listed in the monster encyclopedia. Perhaps too dangerous to categorize. Or perhaps not a monster at all. Rio returned again. And again. Night after night, he watched it. Fought it. Lost to it. But something inside him shifted. The Dullahan never attacked to kill. It trained him. Tested him. Then, one night, it created a sword of ice. It held it out. Rio stepped forward. The knight vanished. In his hands, he held a weapon born not from rage, but from growth. A sword made of water, honed through silent challenge. Peace didn't last. While training, Rio sensed something. Familiar. Dangerous. The assassin hawk. But different. Its feathers were darker. Its body, larger. It had evolved, and it wanted revenge. 5 layers of ice wall, shattered. 10 layers, obliterated. Even icicle lance failed. Then the sword, his last hope. It clashed with the bird's charge. For the first time, his strike landed true. They fought. Blade versus beak. Ice versus wind. Magic and instinct in deadly collision. Finally, he pierced it again. The assassin hawk fell. Rio stood over it, breathing heavily. He saw it clearly now. This enemy hadn't returned for vengeance. It returned to test him, like the Dullahan, to make him stronger. Thanks, he whispered. He gave it a respectful end. And then the world grew quiet again, until the voice echoed inside his mind. A dragon, a being of overwhelming power, speaking calmly through telepathy. Rio, stunned, responded. He confessed he'd fought and killed the evolved assassin hawk. The dragon, named Lewin, wasn't angry. In fact, he was impressed. He noticed Rio's sword, the gift from the Dullahan, and recognized it immediately. The Fairy King's sword, a relic of immense value, a mark of being chosen. Rio didn't know how or why he had it. Lewin smiled, then vanished. Rio stood still, overwhelmed. He just had a conversation with the dragon. Back in the white void, Michael stared at Rio's slab. He'd overlooked something, a hidden trait, so rare it hadn't appeared in 10,000 years. Agelessness. Rio Mahara, reborn into FAI, could now live forever. Not just slowly, eternally. Rio had only left the house to check on some grilled monster fish. What he got instead was chaos. The beach was a wreck. Tosco's voice cut through the confusion, relieved that Rio was okay. But Rio didn't understand. His senses hadn't picked up anything off. More importantly, what was with this outfit? Wasn't there something more appropriate? Before he could get caught up in thoughts about clothing, the unfamiliar boy nearby sat up and introduced himself. Abel. That's who this was. Abel was surprised. Rio had saved him, right? Rio casually explained. He'd only carried Abel back to his house. And unfortunately, Abel had been the only one he managed to rescue. So there were others then. Abel's expression stiffened. Others had been washed ashore too. But Rio dismissed it. They were smugglers, he said. Not worth worrying about. And that was that. There wasn't much to do except eat. So they did. As they sat together, Abel introduced himself more fully, and Rio did the same. Rio, a water attribute mage. Abel was impressed, not just by the name, but by the meat. It was grilled well, and apparently hunted personally. Abel asked about the knife, curious if Rio hunted with that tiny thing. Rio clarified, it wasn't a weapon, just a tool for dismantling. Magic was his real weapon. Magic. Abel said that even in the central countries, only about half of the people could use it. Half. That clashed with what Michael had told him. Wasn't it 1 in 5? Rio paused, confused, but he shook it off. When Abel asked if Rio had any other clothes, the answer was blunt. No. No cloth. No thread. No money. Abel chuckled. He might have just insulted the man who saved his life. Still, they kept eating, joking, relaxing. Then Abel turned serious. He wanted to check the coastline. Rio agreed without resistance. But along the way, Abel noticed something strange. Rio didn't have a staff. A mage without a staff? That was unusual. Abel shrugged it off. Maybe Rio was just down on his luck. Then came the real request. Abel wanted to head north, toward the town of Lon. He had no idea where he was, no map, no bearings. He wanted Rio to act as a guide. Rio thought about it. He'd been living a peaceful, isolated life. This was a detour, but in the end he accepted. They'd leave tomorrow. Before the journey could begin, Rio had one last thing to do. That night, he stepped out alone. He had someone to meet, a presence he could only approach at this hour. The being never responded, but he always felt it listening. Tonight, he offered his thanks. He told it he'd be leaving the forest of London for a while. He didn't know what kind of being it was. Spirit? Guardian? It didn't matter. He'd survived this long thanks to it. And tonight, to honor their last meeting, he went all out in his magic practice. It was his way of saying farewell. Morning came. The two departed. Abel took the lead and asked Rio to stay back. He wanted to fight first if anything happened. He couldn't just keep being protected. It was about pride. Rio nodded. That made sense. Then a noise ahead made them freeze. Lizardmen, tough enemies, especially in wetland terrain. Abel suggested they lure them into the forest. It didn't work. They were being chased. They had to fight. Rio wasted no time. He summoned 4 icicle lances at once. Abel was stunned, not just by the magic, but by how many Rio conjured at once. Normally, magic activated 1 at a time per chant, but Rio didn't know that. For him, this was normal. As the battle settled, Rio conjured clean water. Hydration was important. He used to chant out loud this time. Abel noticed. Wasn't Rio silent the first time? Rio brushed it off. Maybe Abel was imagining things. They kept walking. Abel showed Rio a coin, 1 florin. Currency from the kingdom of Nightlay. Nightlay, a strong-sounding name. Apparently, every country in the Central Nations had its own currency, though the units stayed the same. Nightlay was one of 3 major powers. The others? The Dabuhi Empire and the Handel Confederation. Dabuhi? Rio couldn't stop laughing. That name was awful. Abel wasn't amused. But he agreed, a country's name mattered. I'm from Dabuhi didn't sound great. Visibility improved. Then came trouble. Rock golems. They'd stumbled into a nest. Abel attacked with Electro Strike, but it regenerated. Rio stepped up. He cast Ice Wall and used mass compression. The resulting impact took out 2 golems in one shot. Abel was stunned. A weapon based on mass manipulation? They cleared out the remaining golems. One fell and stopped moving, likely because it lost its link to the earth. Rio inspected the body and found something inside, a magic stone. Massive and deep-colored. It had been absorbing mana from monsters for ages. A rare find. Too bad they couldn't retrieve the others. Suddenly, the ground shook. A giant creature approached, a behemoth. Neither of them had seen one before. Then came another, a wyvern. A clash was coming, and they were front-row spectators. They watched in awe as the 2 monsters collided. Rio rooted for the behemoth, nicknaming it Bichon. The battle didn't last long. Magic nullification occurred. The wyvern's presence vanished. Rio sighed. He wanted to see round 2. Abel rolled his eyes. But the moment wasn't over. Magic nullification. A concept Rio had heard of. It appeared in dungeon traps. Abel brought it up. Was Rio interested in dungeons? Of course. What kind of fantasy fan wasn't? Abel casually mentioned that the only dungeon in the Central Nations was in Lon. Rio lost it. Why didn't Abel say that sooner? He demanded more information. Abel complied. He explained the 3 major races. Dwarves, strong, skilled blacksmiths. Some even lived in Lon. Elves, more mysterious. Most lived in remote forest settlements. Only 1 elf resided in Lon, just as Rio imagined. As they climbed the northern mountains, Abel asked where Rio got all this information. Rio hesitated. He couldn't exactly explain that it came from a higher being beyond mortal comprehension. He simply said, best not to ask. Abel didn't push. They were lucky to be alive after all. Still, Abel noted that the magical presence of that behemoth was terrifying. If it had attacked, they'd be dead. Reports said behemoths and griffins hadn't been seen in centuries. This land was unusual. Rio took offense. Maybe people just hadn't tried hard enough. Abel grew more serious. The wyvern they saw, it likely came from the northern sky. That confirmed something. The mountain range acted as a lid, a natural barrier preventing monsters from flooding human lands. And now they were inside it. Abel didn't want to be right, but now they had a problem. They couldn't just walk around the wyverns. Eventually, they'd have to fight. Rio didn't hesitate. He offered a plan: ground the wyvern first, then strike. Abel agreed. If it stayed airborne, they were doomed. Rio took position. Calm, focused. He summoned another volley of icicle lance. For spears launched upward and struck true. The wyvern plummeted to the ground. Abel blinked. It was over. That was too fast. Wasn't this supposed to be a thrilling, blood-pumping fight? Rio teased him. Didn't he want action? Abel shut it down. That was perfect. Efficient. Let's do that every time. Rio nodded. All right then. Let's clear out the entire wyvern swarm. Abel didn't argue. Just charge forward. Yep. Rio thought to himself. Abel really was a battle maniac. The skies cleared. The path ahead lay open. But their journey was far from over. Monsters, dungeons, secrets, and perhaps something far more powerful waiting in the shadows. And neither of them yet knew that Rio was ageless.